Presentation will be on servant leadership. So first off, this is just a slight overview of what we're going to be covering. So it's what is leadership and what does that mean for me? Because it's all different there. And then we're going to cover what is servant leadership specifically, and then John Molson, who's a Canadian entrepreneur who really embraces this style of leadership. So, what is leadership and what does it mean for me? Well, leadership is really, really hard to define because our view is so unique to ourselves of what leadership is. Because no one has the exact same view of what leadership is. So it really depends on the place and region as the context changes. Like for example, in Western society, we really embrace integrity, and there's a few other things that we like really um, really embrace as a culture versus in Latin America where they really emphasize relationships over um, and emphasize values really and not as much as integrity. So you have to be very careful because what leadership looks like changes across cultures. So that's something to keep in mind when you're really looking at it. And then also, it's really responsible for creating goals and setting the vision and putting policies and strategies in place for the organization to follow constant, consistent, and efficient processes. This is how I would define leadership because all leaders have to create a goal, set a vision, and put the policies and strategies in place for whatever that may be because our version of what leadership looks like is so different, but the aspect of what it's supposed to do is the same. So the output is what I'm really defining as leadership because leadership is so different. Specifically, like this is just leadership in general. This isn't really specifying servant leadership because that's a whole other thing of again. So specifically, what is servant leadership? It's led by example. So it's modeling the way you have to really show the example. You definitely can't ask other people to do something you don't want to do. That would be the exact opposite of servant leadership. You'd have to yeah, even if you don't understand something, you still have to be willing to do it. That's part of servant leadership. So even though you might be really bad at doing something, you're still willing to do it and take that step. You might need a lot of help get there, but you're still willing to do it, and that's what servant leadership is all about. It doesn't necessarily mean being excellent and absolutely fantastic at something, because quite often you aren't. So it's really defined. Like when you define it through the lens of servant leadership, it's as I said earlier, I use the Leadership Challenge, which is a book written by James and Barry, not that long ago, and it is called the Leadership Challenge. But they outlined 5 practices that were very specific that they really thought would be beneficial for us. So, and it really helped with my study with Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last, because it really talked about there that the Marine Corps would always let their officers eat last because they want to make sure that their team members' basic needs are met. And that's what really servant leadership is, because you have to model the way. You have to set the example that you want to see. You have to inspire a shared vision. You have to challenge the process, enable others to act, encourage the heart. That's what leadership is. And when you put that in the lens of a servant leadership, that's a very motivating but also very challenging thing to do because it's not something that will come very easily to some people. But here's actually the book right here that I've got. It's called Servant Leadership, or sorry, Leaders Eat Last, and it's by Simon Sinek. It's an absolutely fantastic book on servant leadership and putting others before yourself. So I would definitely recommend a good read if you want to read this because it really highlights in practice of what it's going to look like when you want to implement servant leadership in your company. So here's John Molson. He's a guy that owned Molson Brewery. He didn't really start it, but he jumped in on the company. He came to Canada for a very fresh start. He didn't have much. It was a massive leap of faith for him to come into Canada when he had essentially nothing. and he started working for a brewery, and he really slowly took on a leadership role in the brewery. And then he bought out his partners when there was a setback because they had a really high inventory and low revenue. So obviously they were either picking the wrong things to stock, or something wasn't quite right, but the leadership needed to change, so something had to be done about it. So he ended up buying them out, and then when he bought them out, that actually really shortened the decision making process. And then he used everything to his advantage, right? So when you do that, then it really helps to establish how do I say this? It really helps to establish a form of leadership that shows that he's willing to do what it takes, and he's willing to challenge that process and show what he wants done. And and he doesn't, nothing was impossible or out of scope for him. He was willing to invest in other things other than in his brewery, to diversify his investing. Like he was very good at that, and he was very easy to work with, and there's a lot of compliments on, everyone loved working for him. So that was actually quite something. And the And for conclusion, then, servant leadership, you really have to model the qualities that should be seen and vocalize them. It's one thing to do them and not say them, but if you do both, you do it and you say what you're doing and you explain why, and you just reiterate and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, that will really show that servant leadership is what you're going to want to do. And it's really going to highlight the value of servant leadership because they're going to see the results of what you're doing, and you're telling them what you're doing. So it's not like they're seeing it and not understanding. They're getting both. So servant leadership is really about putting others first. And when you're putting your team members first, validating their needs and showing that you care and you want them to collaborate better and you want all these things, and then you yourself employ all of these things, they're going to see it, and they're going to see that nothing is impossible, that teamwork is a key to success, and they're going to be much happier because everyone is willing to put the extra mile in to make sure that their team members do well, and it's not about themselves anymore. So it becomes a very unselfish behavior and habitat that will really generate a lot of good feelings and will actually increase productivity in the end. So you really want that servant leadership in a company because it does so many other things, and it creates a new generation of leaders that are willing to put each other first again. And that culture that permeates through the whole organization, whether it's top down or bottoms up, it doesn't matter, but once it comes into the organization, it will slowly, people will embrace it because they see it coming through. And if you don't jump on the train, they end up leaving. So it's really it's a culture that is very strong, and once someone starts it, it's very hard to get rid of it because it catches on. And that's the best part about servant leadership. It's not one person is a leader, everyone is a leader. Yes, one has the authority, yes, but everyone is leader in servant leadership because everyone contributes. No one has the ultimate power to, you know, whatever. But it's everyone is a leader, they all contribute, they all help. And then at the end, everyone benefits because everyone is putting their colleagues first. And that's what servant leadership is about, and what it should always be in business. Because if you put other people first, especially in your company, you will have happier employees, and happier employees create better retention, and better retention increases productivity and everything else. So you're going to want that, and that's what's really important about servant leadership.